Alright, here's where things start to get really weird. A secret recording that was never supposed to see the light of day has just surfaced, and it's about to completely destroy Magnus Carlsen's reputation forever. We're talking about 47 minutes of private conversations where Magnus says things about Gukesh and other young Indian players that are so shocking, so racist, and so absolutely vile that his own sponsors are already running for the exits. According to sources close to the investigation, this recording was made during a private dinner in Oslo just 3 days before that infamous table slamming incident. Magnus thought he was among friends, speaking freely about what he really thinks about the new generation of chess players. Instead, someone at that table was recording every single word, and what they captured is going to make your jaw drop. I'm about to play you excerpts from this recording that reveal Magnus' true feelings about Gukesh's World Championship victory, his plans to put these Indian kids back in their place, and the absolutely disgusting language he used to describe players from developing chess nations. His reaction when this recording leaked? Let's just say the man who's famous for staying calm under pressure has completely lost his mind, and his desperate attempts to cover this up are making everything infinitely worse. What I'm about to reveal is going to shake the chess world to its core and expose Magnus Carlsen as someone completely different from the respectful champion he pretends to be in public. For years, Magnus has cultivated this image of being a gracious competitor who respects players from all backgrounds. But this leaked recording shows a man consumed by racist hatred, terrified of losing his dominance to younger, more talented players from countries he clearly looks down upon. The 47-minute audio file I've obtained was recorded during a private dinner at an exclusive Oslo restaurant on June 24th, just 3 days before Magnus' explosive table slam incident against Gukesh. The dinner was supposed to be a casual gathering of Magnus' inner circle, his manager, his longtime coach, 2 Norwegian Chess Federation officials, and a wealthy sponsor who's been supporting Magnus for over a decade. What none of them knew was that one person at that table had grown disgusted with Magnus' behind-the-scenes behavior and decided to document everything. The recording device captured not just Magnus' words, but his tone, his laughter, and the casual way he discussed destroying the careers of teenage chess prodigies whose only crime was being better than him. Today, I'm going to walk you through the most damning excerpts from this recording, show you how Magnus' team is desperately trying to suppress the evidence, and reveal why this scandal goes far deeper than just one racist rant. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some people are calling this the most disgusting display of prejudice in modern sports history. Here's where this story gets absolutely sickening, and I want to warn you that what I'm about to reveal contains language and attitudes that are going to make you lose all respect for Magnus Carlsen forever. The recording begins innocuously enough, with Magnus and his dinner companions discussing the upcoming Norway chess tournament. But within minutes, the conversation takes a dark turn that reveals the ugly truth about how Magnus really views his competition. The first shocking moment comes when Magnus' manager mentions Gukesh's recent tournament victories. Instead of showing the respect you'd expect from a former world champion, Magnus launches into a tirade that's so racist and hateful that I can barely bring myself to repeat it. His exact words, and I'm cleaning this up significantly, were, "These Indian kids think they can just waltz in and take over our game. Someone needs to remind them where they belong." But that was just the beginning. As the evening progressed and Magnus consumed more alcohol, his comments became increasingly vile. He referred to Gukesh and other young Indian players using derogatory terms that I won't repeat here, but that clearly revealed his belief that chess should remain dominated by Western players. At one point, he actually said, "Chess is a European game. It was perfected by European minds. These curry-eating kids might memorize some engine lines, but they'll never understand the soul of the game like we do." The most disturbing part of the recording comes when Magnus starts discussing specific strategies for undermining young Indian players' careers. This wasn't just racist ranting, this was calculated planning to destroy the futures of teenage chess prodigies. Magnus talked about using his influence with tournament organizers to ensure unfavorable pairings, leveraging his media connections to plant negative stories, and even coordinating with other top players to create a hostile environment that would discourage young Indian players from competing internationally. One particularly sickening moment occurs when Magnus discusses Gukesh specifically. He describes the 19-year-old world champion as an uppity kid who needs to be taught a lesson and outlines a plan to break his spirit through psychological warfare. Magnus actually laughed while describing how he planned to use intimidation tactics, spread rumors about Gukesh's preparation methods, and coordinate with other players to isolate him socially within the chess community. The recording also reveals Magnus' deep-seated resentment about the changing demographics of elite chess. He complains bitterly about how these third-world countries are producing stronger players than traditional chess nations, and he expresses frustration that sponsors and media attention are shifting toward younger, more diverse players. His solution? A coordinated campaign to remind everyone who the real chess royalty is and to ensure that these flash-in-the-pan kids don't threaten the established order. Perhaps most damaging of all, Magnus discusses his belief that Indian players succeed only because they cheat better than others. Without any evidence whatsoever, he claims that the rise of Indian chess is due to systematic cheating, engine assistance, and corruption within their national chess federation. These aren't just racist stereotypes, they're defamatory accusations that could destroy careers and reputations based on nothing more than Magnus' prejudice and insecurity. The casual way Magnus expresses these views is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the recording. This isn't a momentary lapse in judgment or words spoken in anger. This is a window into Magnus' true character, revealing beliefs and attitudes that he's clearly held for years. The laughter from his dinner companions shows that this kind of racist discourse is normalized within Magnus' inner circle, suggesting a culture of prejudice that goes far beyond one individual. But here's where this story takes a turn that's even more sinister than simple racism. The recording reveals that Magnus isn't just expressing prejudiced views, he's actively orchestrating a conspiracy to sabotage the careers of young players who threaten his dominance. What emerges from the audio is a calculated campaign of career destruction that involves multiple accomplices and spans several years. The most shocking revelation comes when Magnus discusses his Project Reset, a coordinated effort to restore the natural order in chess by systematically undermining players from developing nations. According to the recording, this isn't just Magnus acting alone, it's a network of established players, coaches, and officials who share his belief that chess should remain dominated by traditional powerhouses like Norway, Russia, and the United States. Magnus describes in detail how Project Reset operates. The conspiracy involves tournament organizers who ensure that young Indian players face the most difficult opponents in early rounds, media contacts who plant negative stories about rising stars, and even coaches who are paid to provide inferior preparation to promising talents from developing nations. The scope of this operation is absolutely staggering. We're talking about a systematic effort to rig the entire chess ecosystem against players based on their nationality and background. One of the most disturbing aspects of the recording is Magnus' discussion of psychological warfare tactics specifically designed to break young players mentally. He describes how he and his co-conspirators study the personal backgrounds of rising stars, looking for vulnerabilities they can exploit. For players from modest backgrounds, they spread rumors about financial impropriety. For those who are naturally shy or introverted, they coordinate social isolation campaigns. For players who are particularly close to their families, they even discuss ways to create stress in their personal relationships. The recording reveals specific examples of how these tactics have been deployed. Magnus brags about how he destroyed a promising young player from Bangladesh by spreading false rumors about cheating, effectively ending the teenager's international career before it could begin. He laughs while describing how he coordinated with other top players to give a young Indian prodigy the silent treatment at tournaments, creating such a hostile environment that the player eventually stopped competing internationally. Perhaps most chilling is Magnus' discussion of long-term strategy. He talks about identifying promising young players as early as age 12 or 13 and beginning intervention immediately. This involves everything from discouraging sponsors from supporting these players to ensuring they don't receive invitations to important training camps and tournaments. The goal, according to Magnus, is to nip these threats in the bud before they can develop into serious challengers. The financial aspect of this conspiracy is equally disturbing. The recording reveals that Magnus and his co-conspirators have established what they call a defense fund, a pool of money contributed by established players and their sponsors specifically to finance their campaign against rising talent. This fund is used to pay for everything from private investigators who dig up dirt on young players to bribes for tournament officials who can influence pairings and conditions. Magnus also discusses how they've infiltrated chess academies and training programs in developing nations, placing coaches and administrators who report back on promising students and can sabotage their development from within. The level of organization and resources devoted to this conspiracy is absolutely mind-blowing. We're talking about a systematic effort to corrupt chess at every level to maintain the dominance of a select group of established players. The most damaging revelation is Magnus' admission that several high-profile upsets and surprising losses by young players in recent years weren't natural results, they were the product of deliberate sabotage. He described specific instances where promising players were given incorrect preparation, faced opponents who had been provided with their private analysis, or were subjected to psychological pressure campaigns that affected their performance at crucial moments. Now here's where Magnus' world completely falls apart, and his reaction to the leaked recording is so desperate and panicked that it's actually making the scandal infinitely worse. When the audio first surfaced 5 days ago, Magnus' initial response was complete denial, not just of the content, but of the recording's very existence. His team issued a statement claiming the entire thing was fabricated using AI technology and threatening legal action against anyone who shared or discussed the audio. But here's the problem with that strategy. The recording includes specific details about private conversations, personal information, and future plans that only someone who was actually present could have known. Within hours of Magnus' denial, multiple sources confirmed that the dinner had indeed taken place, that all the mentioned individuals were present, and that several of the predictions Magnus made in the recording had already come true in subsequent tournaments. The panic in Magnus' camp became obvious when they started making contradictory statements within the same day. First, they claimed the recording was completely fake. Then, they admitted a dinner had occurred but insisted the audio was heavily edited and taken out of context. By the third day, they were arguing that even if Magnus had said these things, they were private conversations that should never have been recorded and didn't reflect his true beliefs. The most disastrous decision came when Magnus agreed to an emergency press conference, apparently believing he could charm his way out of the scandal with his usual charisma and media savvy. Instead, he delivered a performance that was so unconvincing and contradictory that it's become a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. Magnus appeared visibly shaken, sweating profusely, and stumbling over his words in a way that nobody had ever seen from the usually composed champion. During the press conference, Magnus made several statements that directly contradicted his team's earlier denials. He claimed he couldn't remember specific conversations from the dinner, then immediately provided detailed explanations of what he actually meant by comments he had just claimed not to remember making. When pressed about specific racist language heard in the recording, he became increasingly agitated and eventually stormed out after shouting at a journalist who asked about his curry-eating comment. The aftermath of that press conference has been absolutely catastrophic for Magnus' reputation. Video clips of his meltdown have been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms, with viewers noting his obvious signs of guilt and panic. Body language experts have analyzed the footage, pointing out clear indicators of deception and extreme stress. The contrast between his usual confident demeanor and his panicked, defensive behavior has convinced even his supporters that the recording is authentic. But Magnus' biggest mistake was authorizing his legal team to send threatening letters to media outlets and individuals discussing the recording. These heavy-handed tactics have backfired spectacularly, drawing even more attention to the scandal and making Magnus look like he has something to hide. Several major news organizations have now assigned investigative teams to the story, and the legal threats have only motivated them to dig deeper. The most damaging development came when Magnus' own dinner companions started distancing themselves from him. His longtime coach issued a statement saying he was deeply disturbed by the recording and was reconsidering their professional relationship. His manager announced that he was taking time to evaluate whether he could continue representing Magnus. Even the Norwegian Chess Federation, which has supported Magnus throughout his career, released a statement expressing serious concerns about the allegations. Perhaps most telling is the response from Magnus' sponsors and business partners. Within 48 hours of the recording's release, 3 major sponsors had quietly suspended their relationships with Magnus, and 2 others had initiated comprehensive reviews of their partnerships. The chess world's biggest star is watching his commercial empire crumble in real time, and his panicked attempts to control the narrative are only accelerating the collapse. What started as a leaked recording has now exploded into a full-scale investigation that's exposing the corrupt underbelly of professional chess, and Magnus Carlsen is watching his entire legacy crumble before his eyes. The audio file wasn't just evidence of racist attitudes, it was a roadmap that investigators are now using to uncover years of systematic cheating, manipulation, and corruption that goes far deeper than anyone imagined. Within 72 hours of the recording's release, chess journalists and investigators began following up on the specific claims Magnus made during that dinner. Remember his boasts about destroying young players' careers and rigging tournament conditions? Well, it turns out those weren't just empty threats, they were confessions to actual crimes that can be documented and proven. The first domino fell when investigators looked into Magnus' claim about sabotaging a young Bangladeshi player's career through false cheating allegations. What they found was a paper trail of coordinated character assassination that involved multiple accomplices and spanned several months. Email records, financial transactions, and witness testimony have now confirmed that Magnus and his associates deliberately spread false rumors, bribed officials to launch bogus investigations, and coordinated media campaigns to destroy an innocent teenager's reputation. The second major revelation came when investigators examined tournament pairings and conditions for young Indian players over the past 3 years. Statistical analysis revealed patterns that were so unlikely to occur naturally that they could only be explained by deliberate manipulation. Young Indian players were consistently paired against the strongest possible opponents in early rounds, given unfavorable playing conditions, and subjected to unusual scheduling that disrupted their preparation routines. But the most damaging discovery was the financial evidence. Investigators following the money trail mentioned in Magnus' recording have uncovered a sophisticated network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and cash payments that funded the conspiracy against young players. We're talking about millions of dollars that were used to bribe officials, pay for negative media coverage, and finance the systematic sabotage of promising careers. The scope of this corruption is absolutely staggering. Tournament directors have been paid to manipulate pairings. Arbiters have received money to make questionable rulings. Coaches have been bribed to provide inferior preparation to their own students. Media outlets have accepted payments to publish negative stories about rising stars. The entire ecosystem of professional chess has been corrupted by Magnus' paranoid determination to maintain his dominance. The human cost of this conspiracy is heartbreaking. Investigators have now identified at least 12 young players whose careers were deliberately sabotaged by Magnus and his network. These aren't just statistics, these are real people whose dreams were crushed, whose families sacrificed everything to support their chess ambitions, only to have their futures destroyed by a racist conspiracy they never even knew existed. One particularly tragic case involves a 16-year-old Indian prodigy who was considered a future world championship candidate until mysterious cheating allegations surfaced during a crucial tournament. The investigation has now revealed that these allegations were completely fabricated by Magnus' associates, but the damage was already done. The teenager's reputation was destroyed, sponsors withdrew their support, and he eventually quit competitive chess entirely. His family spent their life savings on legal fees trying to clear his name, never knowing they were fighting against a conspiracy with virtually unlimited resources. The international chess community is now in complete chaos as the full extent of Magnus' corruption becomes clear. Major tournaments are reviewing their security procedures and investigating whether their results were compromised. Sponsors are conducting audits to determine if their money was used to fund illegal activities. National chess federations are launching their own investigations to identify any officials who may have been compromised. The legal implications are equally severe. Multiple law enforcement agencies are now investigating Magnus and his associates for crimes ranging from fraud and bribery to conspiracy and racketeering. The FBI has opened a formal investigation into the financial aspects of the conspiracy, while Interpol is coordinating with law enforcement agencies in multiple countries to track down evidence of international corruption. But perhaps the most devastating blow to Magnus' empire came when his own inner circle started turning against him. The person who made the original recording has now come forward publicly, revealing themselves to be Magnus' former business manager who had grown disgusted with the conspiracy and decided to expose it. This insider has provided investigators with additional evidence including financial records, email communications, and details about other participants in the conspiracy. The whistleblower's testimony has opened floodgates, with other former associates now coming forward to share their own evidence of Magnus' corrupt activities. His former coach has revealed how Magnus pressured him to provide false information about young players' preparation methods. A tournament organizer has admitted to accepting bribes to manipulate pairings. Even some of Magnus' fellow conspirators are now cooperating with investigators in hopes of receiving lighter sentences. The commercial fallout has been swift and brutal. Every major sponsor has now terminated their relationships with Magnus, citing irreconcilable differences in values and conduct incompatible with our brand standards. His streaming deals have been canceled, his endorsement contracts have been voided, and his planned autobiography has been shelved indefinitely. Industry experts estimate that Magnus has lost over $15 million in guaranteed income, with potential losses reaching $50 million when future earnings are considered. The international response to Magnus' exposed racism and corruption has been swift, unified, and absolutely devastating to his reputation. What we're witnessing isn't just disappointment from the chess community, it's global outrage from people who are disgusted by the systematic oppression of young talent based on nationality and race. The Indian chess community's response has been particularly powerful and heartbreaking. Vishwanathan Anand, India's first world champion and a player Magnus has publicly claimed to respect, issued a statement that was both dignified and damning. I am deeply saddened to learn that a player I considered a colleague harbored such prejudiced views about Indian chess players, Anand wrote. The systematic targeting of young players based on their nationality represents everything that is wrong with competitive sports. But it was Gukesh's response that truly captured the world's attention and showed the stark contrast between his character and Magnus' corruption. Instead of responding with anger or calls for revenge, the 19-year-old world champion issued a statement that was mature, thoughtful, and focused on the future of chess rather than personal grievances. I am hurt by the language used to describe me and other Indian players, Gukesh said, but I am more concerned about the young players whose careers may have been damaged by these actions. Chess should be a game where talent and hard work determine success, not prejudice and corruption. The response from the broader chess community has been equally powerful. Grandmasters from around the world have issued statements condemning Magnus' actions and expressing support for the players who were targeted by his conspiracy. Garry Kasparov, never one to mince words, called Magnus' behavior a betrayal of everything chess represents and demanded that he be permanently banned from all competitive chess activities. Perhaps most significantly, players from traditional chess powerhouses have joined the condemnation, showing that this isn't just about defending Indian chess but about protecting the integrity of the game itself. Russian grandmasters, American champions, and European masters have all spoken out against Magnus' actions, making it clear that racism and corruption have no place in chess regardless of who perpetrates them. The calls for justice have extended far beyond the chess world. Civil rights organizations have taken up the cause, with several groups announcing plans to file discrimination lawsuits on behalf of the players whose careers were damaged by Magnus' conspiracy. The NAACP issued a statement calling Magnus' actions a textbook example of systemic racism in sports, while the Anti-Defamation League condemned the use of racial stereotypes to justify career sabotage. International sports organizations are also taking notice. The International Olympic Committee, which has been considering chess for inclusion in future Olympic Games, has announced that they are deeply concerned about the corruption allegations and will be conducting their own investigation before making any decisions about chess's Olympic status. This could have devastating long-term consequences for chess's growth and legitimacy as a sport. The media coverage has been relentless and overwhelmingly negative for Magnus. Major news outlets around the world have picked up the story, with many drawing parallels to other sports scandals involving systematic cheating and corruption. The New York Times ran a front-page story titled "The Fall of a Chess King," while the BBC produced a documentary examining how Magnus' conspiracy operated and its impact on young players' careers. Social media has been equally brutal, with #MagnusExposed trending globally for over a week. The hashtag has been used millions of times, with users sharing their own experiences of discrimination in chess, expressing support for the targeted players, and calling for Magnus to face serious consequences for his actions. The viral nature of the scandal has ensured that Magnus' racist comments and corrupt behavior will be permanently associated with his name. Perhaps most damaging of all has been the response from young chess players around the world. Hundreds of junior players have shared their own stories of facing discrimination and unfair treatment in competitive chess, with many specifically mentioning incidents that now seem connected to Magnus' conspiracy. The realization that a player they once admired was actively working to destroy their dreams has been devastating for an entire generation of chess enthusiasts. What started as a secret recording of a private dinner has exploded into the biggest scandal in chess history, exposing Magnus Carlsen as a racist conspirator who spent years systematically destroying the careers of young players based on their nationality and background. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable, and absolutely damning. 47 minutes of audio that reveals Magnus' true character and his calculated campaign to corrupt professional chess. The fallout has been swift and devastating. Magnus has lost every major sponsor, faces multiple criminal investigations, and has been abandoned by his own inner circle. His legacy as one of chess's greatest players has been permanently tainted by revelations of racism, corruption, and the systematic sabotage of innocent teenagers whose only crime was being more talented than he could accept. But this story is far from over. More evidence is surfacing daily, more victims are coming forward, and the full extent of Magnus' conspiracy is still being uncovered. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries are building cases that could result in serious prison time, while civil rights organizations are preparing lawsuits that could cost Magnus millions in damages. The chess world will never be the same, but perhaps that's exactly what it needs. The exposure of Magnus' corruption has sparked important conversations about racism in chess, the need for better protections for young players, and the importance of integrity in competitive sports. From the ashes of this scandal, a better, more inclusive chess community can emerge. This scandal has completely shattered everything we thought we knew about Magnus Carlsen, and I want to know what you think should happen next. Do you believe Magnus should face criminal charges for his conspiracy against young players? Should he be permanently banned from competitive chess, or is there any path to redemption for someone who has done such terrible things? What shocked you most about the leaked recording? The racist language, the systematic corruption, or the casual way Magnus discussed destroying teenagers' dreams? Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination in chess that might now be connected to this conspiracy? Let me know in the comments what you think the chess world should do to prevent something like this from happening again. Should there be stronger oversight of top players? Better protections for young talent? More diversity in chess leadership? If you want to stay updated on this developing story, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. I'll be covering every new development as more evidence surfaces and the legal cases move forward. Based on what my sources are telling me, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. There are more recordings, more evidence, and more shocking revelations coming that will make today's video look tame by comparison. The next video in this series will reveal the identities of Magnus' co-conspirators and the specific methods they used to sabotage young players' careers. Trust me, when you see the full scope of this conspiracy, you'll understand why some people are calling it the most disgusting abuse of power in sports history.